All right, so today we're diving deep into, Nike.
Nike.
Yeah, Nike. Everyone knows the swoosh, right?
Of course.
But how many people actually know how they started? And we're going right to the source for this one. Phil Knight's memoir, Shoe Dog. It's incredible.
Oh, it's a wild ride.
It's a wild ride. The guy was selling shoes out of his car trunk.
I mean, talk about humble
You
beginnings.
know what I mean? Like, how does that even happen? And it's not just about, like, sneakers. It's about, I don't know, ambition and drive.
It's about chasing a feeling even more than a specific goal.
Yes, that's spot on. It's like this crazy passion.
Absolutely.
In the book, he talks about this, like, feeling he'd get when he was running track, like a clarity and energy. He wanted to capture that.
Which is fascinating when you think about it. Most entrepreneurs, they start with a product, a business plan. Knight, he starts with a feeling.
Totally. He wanted to make that feeling his life, not just a business.
And that's where I think you see that unique approach come into play. This wasn't just about selling shoes. It was about capturing an emotion, a state of being.
It's true. But here's the thing. Right after graduating, instead of, like, diving right into the business world, the guy decides to backpack around the world. Like, who does that?
It's unconventional, to say the least, but it speaks to his personality, don't you think? This drive to explore, to experience new things.
Yeah, but did that trip lead to Nike?
In a way, yes. He ends up in Japan almost by chance, and he's immediately captivated by the culture.
I can see that. Japan's amazing.
But he's particularly drawn to their business culture, the emphasis on harmony, indirect communication, the concept of wa.
So different from the American way of doing things.
Right, and Knight recognized the power of that. Building relationships, understanding cultural nuances, that became crucial later on.
So instead of barging in with a sales pitch, he took the time to, build connections, understand how things worked.
Exactly. And it's that approach that lands him the deal with Onitsuka, the makers of tiger shoes.
No way.
It wasn't a slick presentation. It was his genuine passion, his enthusiasm for the shoes.
It's like that saying, enthusiasm sells.
Exactly. And speaking of passion, we can't talk about Nike without talking about Bill Bowerman.
His coach.
More than just a coach, his partner in crime. This guy was obsessed with running shoes.
He was always tinkering, wasn't he? Trying to make the perfect shoe.
Constantly. Remember the waffle iron story?
Refresh my memory. Waffle iron.
The guy used his wife's waffle iron to make a new kind of sole.
Get out.
It's true. That's how the waffle sole was born, out of a waffle iron. A testament to Bowerman's, shall we say, unconventional thinking.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So we have Knight's vision, Bowerman's innovation. What's next?
Well, I hate to break it to you, but the early days of Nike, not exactly glamorous.
Oh, I bet.
Picture this. Knight, fresh out of business school, driving around with a car full of tiger shoes.
Hustling.
His mom, his first customer.
Oh, that's cute.
It was pure hustle, word of mouth. They were building this company one runner at a time.
The ultimate startup story.
Right. But even then, Knight had this knack for finding talent, like Jeff Johnson.
The letter guy.
The one and only. He wasn't a marketing guru or anything, just this guy who believed in Knight's vision and wouldn't stop sending him letters.
Overflowing with ideas.
Exactly. And then there's Penny Parks, this quiet accounting student who ends up becoming, well, you probably know the story.
Is this his wife?
It is. It's actually kind of a sweet story.
See, you can't make this stuff up.
It's true. But the point is, these weren't just hires, they were early believers, people who connected with Knight's vision and were willing to take a chance.
It's like a family, right? All in on this crazy idea.
And that bond becomes even more important as Nike starts to, make a name for itself.
They had to go up against some big names, right?
Oh, yeah. This
Okay.
was long before Nike was Nike. They were the underdog, battling it out with the big boys, Adidas, the whole lot.
David and Goliath.
Exactly. But instead of shying away from the challenge, Knight seems to, thrive on it.
He's got that killer instinct.
He does. Grow or die was his motto. They had to constantly push boundaries, take risks, or get left behind.
That's a high-pressure environment.
That's an understatement.
And they almost went bankrupt, didn't they?
More than once. It was a constant juggling act. Loans, production issues, you name it. It's actually amazing they survived those early years.
Talk about resilience.
Right. But it's out of that struggle, that pressure, that the Nike we know today was born.
No.
And you can't forget about that logo.
The swoosh.
Designed by Carolyn Davidson, a college student knight hired on a whim.
Talk about a story for the grandkids.
Right. And who knew a simple logo could become so iconic it's everywhere?
It's timeless. It's more than a logo. It's, I don't know, it's aspirational.
Exactly. It represents that human desire to push limits, to be better. It really is. It's like embedded in our brains at this point.
Totally. But anyway, back to Nike. So Nike's taking off, but then his personal life takes this interesting turn.
Oh, yeah. He gets married, starts a family.
And get this, his kids, not into sports.
Hmm.
Nope. You'd think, right? With him being, Mr. Nike and all.
You'd think it would rub off, but
It's almost ironic. But it kind of makes sense, too. Like, all that intensity he poured into Nike, maybe it created space for his kids to find their own thing.
makes you think, about how we influence our kids, even unintentionally.
It's true. But, okay, get back to the 70s because things get complicated.
Hmm.
The economy's a mess. Competition's heating up. Nike's got some serious growing pains.
They're not the scrappy startup anymore. Now they're dealing with the realities of being, a global brand.
Global supply chains,
Mm.
keeping the quality up when you're making shoes all over the world.
It's a whole other ball game.
And then there's the sweatshop issue, right?
Yeah, that's a tough one.
It's complex.
Hmm.
On one hand, you're trying to keep costs down, be competitive, but then there are these accusations, worker exploitation, terrible conditions.
It was a big problem back then. Still is in a lot of ways.
And Knight, to his credit, he doesn't shy away from it in the book.
No, he doesn't.
He talks about the struggles, trying to balance, making a profit with doing the right thing.
It's a dilemma a lot of companies face, even today.
Totally. But what struck me is that he doesn't try to hide from it. He admits they messed up, talks about what they did to try and fix it.
It shows a certain level of, self-awareness, humility, maybe.
Yeah, and a willingness to learn, which is more than you can say for some CEOs.
That's for sure.
But amidst all this, the economic turmoil, the controversies, Knight's still obsessed with innovation.
Always pushing the envelope.
And that's where the air soul comes in.
Game changer.
It blew my mind when I read about it. This NASA engineer, Frank Rudy, shows up with this crazy idea.
Using air in shoes? Who would have thought?
Knight thought he was nuts at first. I mean, who wouldn't?
It's not exactly intuitive, is it? Putting air in your shoes.
But Rudy, he was persistent. Passionate, too.
That passion must have been contagious.
It was. Knight decided to take a chance, even though it seemed crazy. And the rest, as they say. But it wasn't all smooth sailing, was it? I mean, getting the technology right.
There were setbacks.
He talks about the Air Tailwind, one of the first shoes with the Air sole.
What happened? I don't remember that one.
Well, it was supposed to be this, revolutionary shoe, but the design was flawed. Some runners got hurt.
Oh, wow. Bad publicity.
A nightmare. Financially, too. But again, that's Knight. He doesn't give up. He learns from it, adapts.
Uses it as fuel.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's a good lesson, right? It's okay to fail, as long as you learn.
That we grow.
But anyway, so Nike's growing like crazy. But the economy's still a mess in the U.S. Competition's getting tougher.
They need a new game plan.
And Knight, he realizes they have to go global.
Which is a whole other challenge. Different cultures, languages, ways of doing business.
Knight talks about the culture clash, the communication breakdowns. It wasn't easy.
It was necessary.
To survive, to thrive. And that's where his leadership really evolves. He goes from micromanaging everything to building this team of trusted lieutenants.
He had to let go a little.
He did, which is hard for an entrepreneur, right? Especially someone as driven as Knight.
It takes a certain self-awareness to realize you can't do it all yourself.
And this is where those, how did he put it? The butt-face meetings, I think he called them.
Oh, yeah, I remember those.
Intense.
They sounded brutal. Yelling, arguing, but also this incredible energy.
The crucible where ideas were forged.
Exactly. And what's interesting is that Knight, he admits he could be a jerk. He had a temper.
Oh, I bet.
But he also knew how to separate that from the work.
Disagree and commit.
Yes. Argue it out. Then once the decision's made, everyone's on board, no matter what.
That's how you get things done.
And that brings us to, I think, one of the biggest turning points for Nike. Going public. Big decision. Huge.
Yeah, talk about a game changer.
I mean, giving up control, answering to shareholders.
Yeah, it's the price of success, in a way.
But it changes things, doesn't it?
Culture-wise. Yeah, can you still be that scrappy, innovative company when you're, a publicly traded behemoth?
Knight wrestled with that big time. He talks about it in the book. Trying to hold on to that core identity, that athlete-first mentality, while also navigating the world of, Wall Street and quarterly
It's like
earnings.
walking a tightrope.
It is, and it makes you wonder, right? If that struggle, that tension, if that's part of what makes Nike, well, Nike.
Because they did manage to stay true to themselves even as they grew.
To a certain extent, yeah. And you got to give Nike credit for that, but it's also about that brand, right?
The swoosh.
The swoosh, just do it. It's powerful. It resonates.
They weren't afraid to be bold either. I mean, signing Michael Jordan when he was still a rookie,
Nobody had done that before.
it was brilliant. And risky.
High risk, high reward.
Totally. But speaking of risk, Knight doesn't sugarcoat the personal stuff either. The sacrifices, the toll it took on his family.
Yeah, it's not all sunshine and roses, is it?
No. And it makes you think, right? Like, what's the point of achieving your dreams if you lose everything else along the way?
It's that classic trade-off, and there's no easy answer.
He talks about his sons, how they weren't into sports. Kind of sad, in a way.
He poured his whole life into this thing, and his own kids weren't even that interested.
It's like he realized success doesn't always look the way you think it will.
And that's what makes Shoe Dog so compelling. It's honest, raw even.
It's a story about ambition, for sure, but it's also about, like, the unexpected detours life throws at you.
And how you handle them.
Exactly. It's not always pretty, but it's real.
So next time you see that swoosh, just remember, there's a whole lot more to the story than meets the eye.
That's for sure. It's been a wild ride, this deep dive. Thanks for joining me.
Anytime.